Hey, what's up, YouTube world? It is your girl here, the Venusian Bull, and I am back with another video. So what we're going to be doing in this series of videos is we're going to be discussing the planets in the eighth house. Yes, I know a lot of people have been waiting for this house. Anything that has to do with the eighth house, Scorpio, Plutonian things, people are always curious. People are always interested. They always want to see, the mystique of this energy. So we're going to be discussing planets in the eighth house, and I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently, as I'm going to have an introductory video to get through with all of like the kind of housekeeping details and everything that the eighth house contains, because I'm going to go very much into depth, pun intended, with the eighth house as it pertains to the planets and things like that. And I didn't want to have to say the same things over and over at the beginning of the video like I usually do, because it's a lot of information and a lot of knowledge that I'm going to be dropping on y'all. So yeah, there will be a description in the comment box of the actual timestamp of when I get to that planet in as it pertains to the eighth house. So don't worry, if you've seen 3 of these, you can skip through them if need be and go just straight to, sun in the eighth, Mars in the eighth, moon in the eighth, whatever. Okay. All right. So let's discuss the eighth house a little bit. Okay. So I also want to kind of put a trigger warning on these videos, because the eighth house deals with a lot of kind of taboo topics, the things that we don't really, want to discuss, the things that are buried beneath the surface and things like that, such as sex, such as death, anything that's taboo, and that could be deemed taboo or beneath the surface. That could even mean astrology or tarot or numerology or any type of occult like studies and mediumship, voodoo, hoodoo, all of that shit. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it comes to kind of like worshiping like ancestors and the dead and things like that. The eighth house has to deal with death, so we may be talking about demons and spirits and all of that type of stuff. So again, trigger warning. And this is the trauma house. A lot of the times I always say that Scorpio is the trauma queen, while Leo is the drama queen. So eighth house energy, there's always going to be some type of trauma that needs to be kind of overcome, but you're not going to escape drama. You're not going to escape trauma having eighth house energy. It's kind of inevitable that you will experience certain things. So I went through the basics: sex, death, anything that has to deal with trauma, transformation, regeneration. This is a very transformative placement. You're always changing, always transforming, and it's usually in major ways. This also has to deal with other people's money, as the second house deals with earned income and money that you earn. The eighth house deals with other people's money. So this isn't necessarily money that you work for. This is money that you get from an inheritance, or like spousal support, or like child support, or like a life insurance policy, or something along those lines. And the eighth house also represents debt that you owe. So not only other people's money, but money that you owe to other people. So creditors, like bankruptcy, all of that stuff that we hate, really, right? I also like to think of the eighth house. The eighth house is kind of about turning trash into treasure. It's very much a purging thing. It's about, getting rid of garbage, and things like that, because Scorpio, which rules the eighth house, actually represents, for lack of a better word, excrement. You know what I'm saying? It represents, the waste out of your body. So it could be like literal waste or like figurative waste that you're kind of doing away with. And that kind of goes along with the transformative aspect of the eighth house. And as a reminder to keep in mind that you need to take account the sign that's on the eighth house cusp, as well as the aspects that the planet is making with any other planets in your chart, because this may modify the energy that you are experiencing in the eighth house. So make sure that you take heed of that. Sometimes I state this periodically in other videos, but I want to get this in the first video, the intro video, so that everybody knows that the characteristics that I state for the planet, that I'm speaking about may vary based off of other variables in your chart. So I want to make that very clear, especially when it comes to, the eighth house, because it's so transformative and it's so, intense, it's so in depth that it can mean so many different things. And speaking of intensity and depth, it has to deal with that. It has to deal with intimate bonds, close bonds. It's the next step up from the seventh house, which is like more like commitment and marriage. And the eighth house is that intimate bond that it's not a you and I, it's a we thing when it gets to the eighth house. So it's that as well. And it's, deep, it's about deep connections, and it's about researching, it's about investigating to get down to the bottom and the depths and, the oceans of things. This is a water house. So you have to remember this is an emotional house. People forget that Scorpio is a water sign sometimes, I think, and emotional, because their exterior can be so, you know what I'm saying? It could be very resting bitch face, but remember that this energy needs to feel deeply, like within the depths of their soul. They need to feel right down into their gut. So they need to feel deeply. This house may be prone to experiencing a lot of pain as well, pain and trauma. And usually, in a lot of instances, that's something that people who have this energy, they actually like. So yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to get into the planets in the eighth house. So stay tuned. See ya. All right, so we're going to be discussing the sun in the eighth house, okay? So this is a very, very powerful placement, because remember, the sun represents vitality, it represents your ego, it represents your personality, it represents what makes you come alive. And essentially, sun in the eighth house, which makes you come alive, is the darkness. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't say being in the dark, but getting in touch with your dark side. This is a more subdued, mysterious position for the sun, with it being in the eighth house. This is somebody who the sun, you have to remember, the sun represents children. So this could also be a position where you experience a lot of like childhood trauma as well. This could be a position where you may experience the death of a father, because the sun represents the father, and it also represents a husband. So you could you could have experienced an unfortunate death of your father or your spouse, particularly a husband. So it can be a very heavy energy, and the sun isn't really meant to be heavy. The sun is light and full of energy and things like that, but when it's in the eighth house, its energy is focused on different things. This is a great researcher, a great investigator. This is somebody who is about intense, strong bonds and relationships. This is not a surface level placement. Also, sun in the eighth house is similar to having sun in Scorpio or having Leo on the eighth house cusp. Okay. And also just remember, as I was doing with the seventh house, as it pertains to what you may attract in a long-term partner, the eighth house kind of plays into that too. So if you have the sun in the eighth house or Leo on the eighth house cusp, you may attract, this is more pertaining to the sign on the eighth house cusp. You may attract Leos, like people with a Leo sun or Leo moon always falling into your eighth house, and you're wondering why you're always getting this type of energy, and you're maybe always wondering why you're having great sex with these people, because they're falling into your eighth house. Okay, understand that as well. All right, this is somebody who is also, very sexual in nature, kind of free of inhibitions, but it's not so out there. It's not so extravagant. You know what I mean? It's more, subdued. It's more like, I know I'm fine. I know I'm sexy. You know what I'm saying? It's that I know that I have this power over you. Remember, the eighth house does have to do with power and control and things like that. And the sun likes to be authoritative. So it's going to have that energy as well. As it pertains to um, you're always going to be constantly transforming as it pertains to your identity, your self identity. There's always going to be constant changing. The way that you were 5 years ago is not the way that you are now. You know what I'm saying? You're going to be going through cycles, and you're going to be constantly transforming and changing, and things of that nature. You know, you appreciate those kind of those intimate bonds, those intimate moments and things like that. Any planet in the eighth house is not about like, you know, that kind of forceful kind of, you know, sex or intimacy. It's about taking your time, and, you know, it's about the sometimes it's just about the cuddling and just the holding and things of that nature. And with the sun in the eighth house, they understand this energy. Also, remember that the eighth house has to deal with other people's money as well. So, with the sun in the eighth house, you may have inherited money from your father or a spouse, particularly because the sun represents the father or the spouse, through like a life insurance policy or something like that. You may also have to deal with, you know, debt owed to these parties, or just, you know, men in general, and things like that. But just, you know, debt in general, like credit cards and real estate and cars and things like that. You may have a propensity to have debt with the sun in the eighth house, but also simultaneously the propensity to gain money from other people, particularly men, no matter your sex. Um, and also when it comes to kind of trauma, I would say a lot of it happened in your childhood. Not to say that it goes away as an adult, but sun in the eighth house, it's like you're coming from a world that, you know how they always say to, you know, you always look at some kids and you're always like, they've been here before. That's kind of sun in the eighth house. You're coming from the underworld. It's like you're coming from the darkness. So it's like when you're two or something, you have this, you know, um, crazy innate way of reading people. Remember, eighth house people are very perceptive, very intuitive, very much into the occult studies. You could be someone who, you know, sees spirits, or sees, you know, demons and things like that. And this can happen at a very young age, you know, as a child and things like that. With the sun in the eighth house, you learn to kind of deal with the darkness and the mysteries of life very young, I would argue. And yeah, you could just be prone to being able to talk to spirits, and to talk to the dead and things like that. Mediumship could be, you know, very prominent. I would say that actually anybody who has eighth house energy or just water energy in general, you always want to check your energy around you, because it's very easy for people with water energy to be able to absorb other people's energy. And use your intuition, use that gut feeling to let you know whether this person is worthy of getting into your space, because eighth house energy is already, you know, private, closed off. They're not going to reveal themselves. They're not going to be vulnerable with you unless they're comfortable. But let me tell you, once they break down those walls, once they choose to be vulnerable with you, it is ride or die. It is, I am loyal to the end. This is the ride or die house. And this is definitely a ride or die placement. So do not betray someone with a sun in the eighth house. They will come back for you. They will seek revenge. This is a very vengeful, because remember, this has to do with your pride. You know what I'm saying? This has to deal with, you know, your vitality and your pride, most importantly. So if somebody is betraying your trust, or you know, gave all of yourself and you were vulnerable and things like that, it's going to be a real punch in the gut if someone decides to betray you or cheat on you or steal from you or anything along those lines. This is like, I mean, this is a very vengeful kind of spirit. They can come back in a very, violent way towards you. So I would strongly recommend to be on your P's and Q's with Sun in the eighth house. Sun in Scorpio on its own can be a bitch, but when you put that Sun in the eighth house, this is where they come alive. You have to understand. And the eighth house also deals with, criminality. It does. So this could be where they come alive with that, unfortunately. So, you should always be trying to operate on the highest vibration of said energy, but like other people, you know what I'm saying? Because this house does have to deal with others, can really bring the worst out of your character, especially if you have Sun in the eighth house. So be very, very wary about the people that you keep in your circle, the sexual partners that you have, and not just in terms of like, STDs and things like that, but just like sometimes you may have, sex with someone or be intimate with someone and you get like a bad reaction, you know what I'm saying, afterwards. Like you may get sick or you may, just feel very uneasy. You have to feel people out and use your intuition. Again, this is a very intuitive energy. Like sex is not just sex when it's in the eighth house. It's very all encompassing. Like everything is all encompassing when it comes to the eighth house. It starts with the meeting and all the way down to when you're actually, having intercourse, you know what I'm saying? And the aftermath of that, you know what I'm saying? So you have to think of the whole big picture of intimacy when it comes to the eighth house, and be very mindful of who you bring into that intimate space with you, because, your body is sacred. Obviously, everybody's body is sacred. You don't have to have energy in the eighth house for your body not to be sacred. That's not what I'm saying. But people with eighth house energy, water energy in general, but especially eighth house energy, really need to be cognizant of this. And your Sun being in the eighth house is really going to put this on display. So you can kind of be, susceptible to those people who are, very promiscuous, and things like that. You also may be prone to, careers in the adult industry and things like that, which it's not anything wrong with that. But remember, just protect your energy, just protect your space and things like that. This is a very sexual energy. This is a very, BDSM. This is 50 Shades of Grey, and all of that. So understand that it's about taboos, and it's about, the things that are the kinks that are not spoken of, that are not deemed to be, as well. Sex in general is still kind of seen as taboo. I mean, I feel like we're getting past this point a little bit, and sex is being able to be discussed more openly. But definitely with Sun in the eighth house, you feel comfortable talking about sex. You feel comfortable, like psychoanalyzing your relationships. You'd make a great therapist. You'd make a great investigator. You're great at getting to the bottom and the root cause of situations. You know what I'm saying? Or any relationships. You could also, find yourself in a very, traumatic, situations as well. Also, though, be sure if you are a therapist that you don't get so wrapped up in your clients' issues and problems, because you could like be so absorbed. You could absorb it so much. This is the thing. You absorb people's energy that you get mixed up into it. And instead of giving the best advice for them, you're thinking that, oh, if I was in this situation, this is what I would do. But keep focus at the task on hand so that you can give the best advice. Because with Sun in the eighth house, you really have the ability to provide a very transformative, very useful, very sound advice for people who experience trauma. You have that capability. So make sure that you use that as well. Okay, another thing I wanted to point out with Sun in the eighth house, as it pertains to transformation and transformation of the body, just remember that the eighth house rules the genitals. So it could literally be like a trans woman, trans man. Get what I'm saying here? Transformation of the genitals because you're transitioning from male to female or female to male. So, I wanted to put that out there too, particularly with the sun in the eighth house, because that literally has to do with what makes you you and what makes you unique and your personality, your vitality, and what makes you come alive. So if you feel like you were born in the wrong body and you were born with the genitalia of a man, but you feel like, internally that you should be a woman, then this is definitely a placement that can show that type of energy. Again, other aspects have to come into play. And I'm not saying that this is definitive. I'm just saying that the transformative state of the eighth house, as well as the sun representing, who you are and your vitality and what makes you come alive, it could be very specific to this particular placement as well. And then the eighth house, um, because Scorpio and both Pluto have to deal with surgical procedures and cutting people up. I mean, this could be very literal in that sense, especially if you have it, making aspects to your ascendant or something like that. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. So yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that tidbit in about Sun in the eighth house also. But like I mentioned before, very investigative, trying to get to the depths of everything. This is also a position that's not afraid of pain, a placement that's not afraid of pain. They're not pain is not foreign to them, whether that be physical pain or emotional pain. This may be somebody who seeks out a partner who literally makes them feel pain or devastation, and that may even be something that's a turn on for them and things like that. So kind of be cognizant of that and think about, do I really love this person because they're good for me, or are they just toxic and they are putting that energy on me? You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of toxicity that can be going on with this placement in the eighth house in general. So remember to keep that in mind. Okay. All right, so I've said a lot about this house, and I still haven't even scratched the surface as it pertains to Sun in the eighth house. So again, if this resonates with you, please leave a comment down below, and please inform me of anything that I may have missed that you want to contribute in the comment section that is poignant and will be useful for any other viewers that are watching this video. This is a collaborative effort. Remember, the eighth house is all about collaboration. So we're working together here, all right? So again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.